Good day, beloved community. Now, if there is one thing that you need to know about me, let it be this. I love to info dump. Get me talking about one of my special interests, and you might not be able to get a word in as edgewise. One of my in-depth studies throughout the years has been child development, and it's been a fascinating journey. Not only has the knowledge served me well as a mother to, why is it not working? To 7 children. It's not clicking for me. There we go. To 7 children, there they are. They're cute, right? But it also given me a deeper understanding of the human experience as a whole. Child development isn't just about the milestones or the age-related behaviors, it's about the intricate ways in which humans grow emotionally, cognitively, and socially. Now, this understanding has equipped me well with insights to navigate each of my children's unique needs and temperaments. From infancy to adolescence, I can often predict their challenges, and I get to celebrate their victories in a more meaningful way. But it's not just about my kids. It's been invaluable to my broader understanding of people. These stages of development shape how we interact, learn, and grow throughout our entire lives. Understanding this process has helped me connect with others on a deeper level, offering empathy and perspectives in ways I may not have without this focus. It's one of my many things I love to do. A deep dive on, constantly learning and reflecting on human beings evolve and what it means for all of us, whether we're children, parents, or just trying to make sense of the world around us. Now, in the early stages of life, a child, as an infant, they're very unaware of the outside world around them. All they know is the sensations they have. But soon, they start showing signs of empathy, such as responding in cries to when another infant cries. You get one baby crying in a room, soon they're all crying. If you've experienced it, you know about it. By preschool, not yet, by toddlers, they're starting to differentiate that they are a different human than the person that, takes care of them. They start to use words like I or me, and they begin to show concern when others are upset. By preschool age, children have developed a clearer sense of self and an emerging understanding that others have feelings that may be different than their own. This early development of self-awareness and empathy sets the foundation for how they will engage with the world around them. As children grow into school age and beyond, their sense of self and empathy deepens. They start to understand that people have different perspectives and complex emotions. By adolescence, many of the ones that are in the room, they have a more fully formed sense of identity. And they are capable of deeply empathizing, say that quite 5 times too fast, with others, even though it may not seem like it when they're slamming doors or telling you they're not doing the dishes, right? But they are capable. They have lives that are driven by compassion and moral values. And this journey of development mirrors the ways Jesus grew in wisdom and understanding as well. He was fully aware of his identity as the Son of God and deeply empathetic towards the struggles of those he encountered. In the same way, we are called to grow in both self-awareness and empathy, reflecting God's love for one another in our daily lives. Today, we're going to talk about a shift that is as challenging as it is essential. It is a shift that goes against the grain of everything we're taught, everything our culture celebrates. It's the shift from me to we. It's the shift from what's best for me to what's best for us all. From what are my preferences to what is our shared purpose. From what do I want to what does my neighbor need. Well, this shift isn't just a good idea, it's the foundation of Jesus' life and ministry. Yet for many people, this shift feels harder today more than ever before. Why is it so hard for us to move from me to we? Maybe it's because of the years of isolation, or the year of isolation, during a shut away from each other during the pandemic, learning to rely on ourselves. Maybe it's the way that our political systems have trained us to see each other as enemies instead of neighbors. Or maybe, and don't send me emails about this, maybe it is just something deeper. Now, I love our country. I do. I really do. But woven into the very fabric of America is this idea that we call rugged individualism. It's the belief that we are all meant to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, and that we should look only for ourselves and for our own, that independence is the highest virtue. Now, another one of my deep dives that I like to do is going into the meaning of phrases that we use, or the words that, the idioms that we have in our language. And so, what does this actually mean, to pull yourself up by the bootstraps? It originally comes from the absurd idea of literally lifting oneself off the ground by tugging enough on the strap of your boot, something that is physically impossible. It was first used in the 1800s to describe an impossible or foolish tasks. But over time, this phrase has evolved into a symbol of self-reliance and the belief that one should overcome challenges through hard work and personal effort alone. But we are not alone in this world. In the context we're looking at, this idea of bootstraps, the term is tied to rugged individualism. It's the idea that we should not rely on anybody else, but only ourselves and our abilities to succeed. This idea became a cornerstone of the American ethos, particularly during the 20th century, when the notion of the self-made success was strongly promoted. This concept continues to influence daily lives and social views today, though it is often criticized for overlooking the systemic barriers and inequities that make pulling yourself up much harder for some people. Now, do not get me wrong. There is strength in independence. There's value in hard work. But when independence becomes isolation, when self-reliance becomes selfishness, we've missed the mark. But this isn't new. In 1831, a 26-year-old Frenchman named Alexis, not trying the French last name, Alexis, came to America. He was sent to study the prison systems here. But what he ended up studying was the Americans. Now, Alexis loved America, its diversity, its energy, its hope, but he noticed something strange, something he hadn't seen in other cultures. He didn't even have a word for it, so he invented one: individualism. He described individualism as this quiet, calm tendency for people to separate themselves from the larger community. He said, Americans isolate themselves with their families and close friends and leave the greater society to take care of itself. Unless, of course, the activities of the group or community just so happen to benefit them directly. I'm sure this sounds familiar. This Alexis wrote in the early 1800s, and yet we are here nearly 200 years later, still wrestling with this same blind spot. It's the blind spot of me over we. But here's the good news. The Bible gives us a different vision. Jesus shows us how to move from me to we. Now, let us look at the early church in Acts 2. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Now that is a beautiful picture of we. These early believers in the church did not cling to what was theirs. They didn't say, I've worked hard for this, it's mine. They saw their possessions, their time, and even their lives as gifts to be shared for the good of the whole community. They weren't just individuals worshiping the same God. They were a family, a body, a household. And this is what the church is meant to be, a movement of we. That's the church transforming into we. Just a fun visual for you all. Do you get it? Okay, sorry, there's a transformer on the screen for those that don't see it. We're transforming into we. Yeah, the church. Transform us into we. Now, the Apostle Paul understood this very deeply. Over and over again in his letters, he paints a picture of the church as something greater than the sum of its parts. Now I'm thinking I should have put Power Rangers in there when they all come together to form that big cat. Isn't that? I don't know. I'm messing up my superheroes. But the Apostle Paul, over and over again in his letters, paints this picture of the church being greater than the sum of its parts. He called the church a body made up of many parts, each one as essential and interconnected. He calls the church a household where strangers become family. He calls the church the bride of Christ, a relationship that only exists in connection with one another. Every one of these images points to the same truth. The church is not about me, it's about we. So how do we make this shift from me to we? How do we break free from the isolation and individualism and truly live out the communal life we are called to? The answer lies in what our children grow into and develop more each day: self-awareness and empathy. Self-awareness is the first step. It's the ability to look at ourselves honestly, to see both our strengths and our flaws, to acknowledge our needs and our biases. It's easy to live in a world where everything revolves around me, my thoughts, my feelings, my desires. But when we take a step back, when we practice self-awareness, we begin to see that we are not isolated. We are part of a larger community, a body of believers, and our actions, words, and choices impact those around us. Self-awareness opens our eyes to the ways in which our individual choices affect the collective well-being. It invites us to ask the question, how is my decision affecting my neighbor? Self-awareness alone is not enough. We need empathy. The ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, to truly feel what they feel, to understand their struggles and joys. Empathy allows us to see our neighbor as more than just a person with a different perspective. It helps us to recognize their humanity and value. It teaches us to care not just about our own needs, but about the needs of others. Now let me bring you to one of my favorite stories of the early church. This is the story of the power couple Priscilla and Aquila. Now they were refugees displaced by Rome by the Emperor Claudius. In Corinth, they met a young, passionate preacher named Apollos. Apollos is from Africa, so it's really cool to see a person of color depicted in some of these old icons. It's really cool. Now Apollos, he didn't quite have it all figured out yet. A young preacher. His teachings were incomplete, and he probably saw the world a little differently than they did. But what Priscilla and Aquila did, They did not dismiss him. They didn't criticize him. They didn't complain to their friends about him. No, they invited him to their home, made room for him, shared what they knew, and encouraged him in ministry. They didn't choose me, they chose we. Now, friends, this is the movement we are called to, from me to we. And I'll be honest, it's hard, it's countercultural, it's uncomfortable, but it's also life-giving. What would it look like to move from me to we in your own life? What would it look like to listen to your neighbor, even when you disagree? What would it look like to put the needs of the community above your own preferences? This is what Jesus did for us. He didn't choose me, he chose we. He laid down his life so that we could be a part of something bigger, part of the family of God. And as we near Christ the King Sunday, we are reminded of this profound truth. Christ, our King, could have chosen me, as in himself. He could have stayed on his throne, distant and removed from the struggle of humanity. He could have stayed safe in the comfort of divinity. But no, instead he chose we. He chooses us. He chooses to come to us, to live among us, to die for us, and to rise again so that we too could be part of God's eternal kingdom. And so on this day where we call Christ the King, we are also called to reflect on the nature of Christ's kingship, one that is not about power and control, but about service and community. Christ's kingship is not a reign of isolation or individualism. It's a reign of connection and communal care. And as we celebrate Christ the King, we are invited to follow his example, to move from me to we, and to live as members of a community where each person's needs, hopes, and dreams matter. So this week, I challenge you, find one way to make more room in your life. One way to choose we over me. It could be as simple as a conversation, a generous act as a generous act of service, or as bold as an apology. So let us move from me to we, because in the end, it is not what I want or even what you want. It's about what God is building in us together under the reign of Christ our King, moving me to we.
My story.